Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I am back with another video. Now today, serial killers, right? You know, you think sick, deplorable, disgusting, disturbed human beings, right? But you have to admit, you probably do sometimes sit there when you're thinking about serial killers and think, well, who is the most prolific? Well, today I have what is believed to be the world's most prolific serial killer, in excess of 200 victims. Today we're going to talk about Harold Shipman, the angel of death, Dr. Death. Before I begin, I just want to say, guys, please, I implore you to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button, because it really helps me grow. It helps YouTube know that you guys like what I'm making, so they can deliver that to you on a more regular basis. We all know that the sub box is broken and even if you have the notification bell, which please hit that notification bell, is on, you won't necessarily get my videos. So hitting that like button, commenting down below, etc. helps YouTube think, oh, you like this guy, I will give you more of his content. So please go ahead and do that for me. So, Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was a doctor who, over a 25 year span, killed over 200 of his patients. Because theories are perhaps he was addicted to killing, but it's certainly known that he was addicted to drugs and would often falsify and forge medical records so that he could essentially overprescribe drugs, or even prescribe drugs that aren't needed for the patient, but not actually tell the patient what he has written into their medical records, and he would take the drugs prescribed. So let's go back to the start of Harold Frederick Shipman's life. Born January the 14th, 1946, Harold Shipman grew up being the middle child in a working class family, but actually apparently the favorite amongst his siblings. His mother was very strict, very dominant, and the way that she brought Harold up meant that he felt that he was better than most of, if not all, of his peers, which most definitely affected him deeply as he grew into an adult. This would make him quite the loner, lacking friends and the ability to build basic relations with people. Now, tragically, Harold's mother was diagnosed with lung cancer, a disease that would later take her life. Now, Harold took over the care of his mother and would administer the morphine, the painkiller that was prescribed to her to get her through her sickness. Now, interestingly, Harold Shipman would observe the effect morphine would have on his mother and the positive effects it would have on her. Sadly, on the 21st of June 1963, his mother died of the illness. Now, he was utterly shattered by her death, but also inspired to become a doctor himself. And after 2 years of trying but failing entry tests, he got into a medical school. This was the Leeds University Medical School. At the age of 19, he met his wife Primrose, who at the time was 17 and 5 months pregnant with their first child. Fast forward to 1974, where he was an established doctor, joining a Yorkshire medical practice in Todmorden. This is apparently where he became addicted to the painkiller known as pethidine, and where his early traits of a serial killer would begin, where he would falsify medical records, as I said, so that he could get prescription drugs and pethidine for his own addiction. Now, he was caught out by his colleagues, and in 1975, just a year after being there, he was ostracized and kicked out of the medical practice. This is when he began doing a drug rehabilitation program. For the crime of forging the prescriptions for the drugs, he was given a small fine and a conviction for forgery. Now, fast forward to Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde. This is where he would be a doctor, a family doctor, for 20 years. Now, it's safe to say he wasn't overly liked by his peers because, like I said, he didn't really have the ability to establish these meaningful friendships or relationships with people, regardless of being married and a father of a few children. He wasn't very liked amongst the practice. He was seen as very arrogant. By all accounts, the junior staff thought he was a bit of a dickhead. Little did they know how much of a dickhead this man really was. Now, as I said, Harold Shipman, over the course of, I think, 28 years, wrongly prescribed drugs and murdered patients via overdoses that he administered himself, and he would alter the medical records to fit the narrative that he was going to put forward. Now, over the course of all this time, you'd think, surely, like, how is no one cottoning on? Well, a few people along the way did. First and foremost, a local undertaker who essentially kind of cottoned on that, bloody hell, it's another patient of Harold Shipman. Is this not a bit odd to anyone? Plus, all of these poor people that have died seem to be seated in their living room quarters, fully clothed, and this really bothered him. And so he approached Harold Shipman directly. He was like, look, this is very odd. What is going on here? But Harold Shipman was just like, don't worry about it. It's just people die. This is just what happens, you know? There's nothing suspicious here. And so he dropped it. However, there was another person, a colleague of Harold Shipman, Dr. Susan Booth, who also picked up on this pattern and thought it was very bizarre. And she went a step further. She didn't go to Harold Shipman and hear his bullshit. She went to a coroner, and the coroner also thought, yeah, odd. And so they put it forward to police. Now, the police done a little bit of investigating on the side, you know, not making Harold Shipman aware of what was going on, just, you know, very under the radar. But unfortunately, all of the records came back clean. It was all pretty standard stuff. Now, is this because Harold Shipman was amending all of the medical records as he went along, even in the hours after or slightly prior to these people's deaths? Something that would later unravel his whole story, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Now, unfortunately, this investigation did one thing that was massively, that was a massive shame at the time, because it could have saved a lot of people's lives, because it would have caught him out. They didn't check his criminal records, in which they would have seen this man forges medical records. So maybe let's look a bit deeper at the medical records, as they may be forged, as this dude has been convicted of forging medical history. But they didn't do that, so he was off the hook for now. Harold Shipman was caught because of the resolve of a woman called Angela Woodruff, who is the daughter of one of Harold Shipman's victims and also a lawyer. She refused to accept the bullshit that Harold Shipman told her of the reasoning behind her mother's death, and also a colossal fuck up in Harold Shipman's decision making was to forge Angela's mother's will so that he would inherit some of her fortune. Something that Angela knew categorically her mother would not do. Kathleen Grundy, Angela's mother, she was a very wealthy person and a very healthy 81-year-old for her age, but on the 24th of June 1998 was found deceased. Shipman had visited her the day of her death and told Angela, much like he told many of the victims' spouses, that an autopsy was not required, and actually you should get her cremated. He always pushed for cremation. Why did he always push for cremation? Because if he was ever investigated and any of these bodies were exhumed, well, how can you exhume ashes? You can't. You can't do an autopsy on a body that has been cremated. And also, what he would sometimes do, which is absolutely abhorrent, was after he administered a deathly dose of painkiller to his victim, if the family's spouses were there, what he would do is he would pretend to call the emergency services, pretend that they were on their way, and then once he announced the person dead at the scene, he would then cancel the call to the emergency services. However, looking at his phone records, it was shown he never once called 999. So anyway, like I said, Shipman was very, very suspicious to Angela, and she was a lawyer. She knew her way around these kind of things. She knew about the court proceedings. She knew about, like, you know, the ins and outs of legal documents and wills, etc. And she knew that this magical will was bullshit and a forgery. So she contacted police, and they investigated, and the investigation came to the conclusion that, yes, Harold Shipman, very, very suspicious. So, thankfully, Angela ignored Harold Shipman's calls to get her cremated, and so the body was exhumed, an autopsy took place, and there was shown to be an overdose of morphine. This overdose that was given to her around 3 hours before her death. When was Harold Shipman with her? Around 3 hours before her death. So because of this, they raided Shipman's house. They found many odd things, lots of medical records, lots of pieces of heirlooms from different victims, and an old typewriter that is believed to have been used to falsify documents, specifically the will and testament of Angela's mother. Now, importantly, when DNA etc. was done to the will, it was found that her mother never once touched that will. There was no fingerprints, and a handwriting analyst concluded that it was a forgery of her signature, and a poor one at that. So police began investigating all of his patients that had died, starting with the ones that weren't cremated, because obviously they had bodies that they could exhume and examine. Now, upon closer inspection, what Harold Shipman did not understand was that computer records timestamp every time you change a medical record. So this allowed police to prove that the medical history was amended either a few hours before or a few hours after the death of the patient, so that it would line up better with whatever BS Harold Shipman would tell should it be investigated. He was not aware of this time-stamping technology at the time, and so that was a major undoing. Eventually, Harold Shipman was put on trial and charged with 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery, for which he got 15 life sentences and I think 4 years for the forgery. This was to be life without parole. However, after being charged, people began to look deeper into Harold Shipman's cases. There was even a study done on all of the 500 patients that died under his care to look for similarities to those that were definitely killed by him, to which a rough figure of 218 victims was concluded. So it is estimated that Harold Shipman murdered around 218 of the patients that were put under his care, that trusted him and that thought that he would at least try his best as a doctor to make them better, not use them for his own drug addiction and not use them for his own addiction to killing. Another little tidbit of information about Harold Shipman, which just shows what a piece of shit he was. He would also visit the homes of the deceased shortly after they died to collect up the medications that they had for, air quotes, disposal, which of course we all now know he actually took for his own personal use. So this was the story of Harold Shipman, the world's most prolific serial killer on record. What do we think about this absolute monster of a man who garnered the names Angel of Death and Dr. Death, the same monikers as Josef Mengele, the Nazi doctor that experimented on twins? Evil, evil, evil abominations to humanity. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. Like I said before, if you could like, share and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. All the links to support me are down below. I have clothing, etc. If that takes your fancy, you want to rep my clothing company, Atma, then that would make my day, to say the least. Thank you, guys. I'll see you very soon with another deplorable human being, I'm sure. Sweet one. Geese.